I watched my cousin Maya slip the moldy cheese into my restaurant's walk in cooler, her manicured fingers careful not to leave prints on the packaging. From my office security monitor, I could see her satisfied smirk as she arranged the contaminated ingredients between my fresh supplies. She had no idea I was watching. She had no idea I remembered everything from my first life, including exactly how she would destroy my business tonight. The health inspector would arrive tomorrow morning. Maya had made sure of that with her anonymous tip. In my previous life, this moment had been my downfall. I'd built Nona's kitchen from nothing, pouring my heart and savings into authentic Italian recipes passed down from our shared grandmother. Maya had smiled at the grand opening, hugged me tight, and whispered how proud she was. 3 months later, she'd orchestrated the health code violations that shut me down permanently, then swooped in to buy my prime location for her own trendy fusion restaurant. I died at 32, broke and heartbroken, watching her succeed with my stolen dream. The heart attack came from stress, the doctor said, but I knew it was from betrayal. The ambulance had rushed me to the hospital on a cold December night, but it was too late. My last coherent thought before the darkness took me was Maya's face at my hospital bedside, fake tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Elena. I should have helped you more." Even in death, she'd been performing. Now, at 28 again, I had a second chance. And this time, I was ready. The memories of my rebirth were crystal clear, even though the experience itself defied explanation. One moment I was dying in that sterile hospital room, machines beeping frantically around me. The next, I was jolting awake in my old apartment, 4 years younger, surrounded by the familiar chaos of planning my first restaurant. The calendar on my nightstand read March 15th, exactly 4 years before my death. At first, I'd thought it was a vivid dream brought on by stress. But as the days passed, every detail I remembered came true with terrifying accuracy. The stock market crash I'd predicted happened exactly as I recalled. The restaurant critic who would discover my place by accident showed up precisely when I expected. Even Maya's behavior followed the same patterns, the same fake smiles, the same subtle sabotage disguised as family concern. The supernatural nature of my situation had taken weeks to fully accept. I'd researched everything I could find about reincarnation, time travel, divine intervention. Nothing explained how I'd been given this impossible gift. But after confirming dozens of my future memories, I stopped questioning the how and started focusing on the why. This was my chance for justice, my chance to turn Maya's own weapons against her. The abuse had started when we were children, long before either of us understood the weight of family loyalty or the poison of jealousy. Maya was Uncle Roberto's only child, born 3 years after my parents died in a car accident when I was 5. Uncle Roberto had taken me in reluctantly, and the resentment in that household was palpable from my first day. Maya had been a beautiful child, golden curls, bright blue eyes, and a smile that could charm anyone. I was the awkward cousin with dark hair and serious eyes, always too quiet, always in the way. Uncle Roberto made it clear which of us belonged and which was a burden. "Maya, come show Daddy your drawing," he'd say, then ignore my attempts to share my own artwork. "Maya needs new shoes for dance class," he'd announce while I wore hand-me-downs from church donations. The message was clear. Maya was precious, and I was tolerated. Maya learned early that my presence diminished her spotlight. She began orchestrating small cruelties designed to remove me from important moments. The morning of my first school play, she accidentally spilled grape juice on my costume. When I made the honor roll, she threw a tantrum about stomach pain that required an emergency doctor visit, stealing the attention from my achievement. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated for a child. Maya would break her own toys, then blame me when Uncle Roberto found them. She'd hurt herself in minor ways, pinching her arm until it bruised, scratching her face with her own nails, then claim I'd attacked her in a jealous rage. Uncle Roberto always believed his golden daughter over the troubled orphan he'd been forced to take in. "Elena has serious anger issues," he'd tell concerned teachers and neighbors. "We're trying to get her help, but she's been damaged by losing her parents. Maya is so patient with her, but we worry about Elena's violent tendencies." By the time I was 10, I had learned to stay invisible. I spent most of my time in the basement, reading books from the library and teaching myself to cook from old magazines. The kitchen became my sanctuary, the one place where Maya's cruelty couldn't reach me. She hated cooking, considered it beneath her, so she left me alone when I was experimenting with recipes. That's when I discovered Nona Elena's recipe book. My great-grandmother had died when I was 3, but Uncle Roberto had kept a box of her belongings in the basement storage room. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, was a leather-bound notebook filled with handwritten recipes in a mixture of Italian and broken English. Each page was stained with decades of use, annotated with notes about technique and tradition. For making the ragu, one note read, you must have patience like the saints. The meat, she needs time to give her secrets to the tomatoes. No rushing, no shortcuts. Love takes time. I spent hours copying those recipes, practicing the techniques in Uncle Roberto's kitchen when the family was out. Maya at dance class, Uncle Roberto at work. The house finally quiet enough for me to breathe freely. I learned to make pasta from scratch, to build flavors layer by layer, to understand the alchemy that transformed simple ingredients into something magical. Cooking became my escape, but it also became my connection to a family that had loved me. Through those recipes, I felt closer to my parents, to the Italian heritage that Uncle Roberto never shared with me. Maya was being raised as an American princess, but I was secretly learning to be Nonna Elena's granddaughter. The abuse escalated as we got older. Maya's methods became more sophisticated, her cruelty more calculated. In high school, she convinced my few friends that I was spreading rumors about them. She'd copy my homework, then report me for cheating when teachers noticed our identical answers. She even sabotaged my college applications, accidentally submitting them after deadlines or with missing components. I'm so sorry, Elena, she'd say with perfect sincerity. I was trying to help, but I must have made a mistake. Maybe community college would be better for you anyway. Not everyone is meant for university. Uncle Roberto supported her narrative completely. When I accused Maya of sabotage, he'd shake his head sadly. Elena, you can't keep blaming Maya for your own failures. She's trying to help you, but you're so jealous of her success that you can't see it. I managed to get into state university on my own, working 3 part-time jobs to pay tuition since Uncle Roberto refused to help with costs. I'm already putting Maya through private school, he'd explained. I can't afford to support both of you equally. Maybe you'll appreciate education more if you earn it yourself. Maya attended an expensive private college on full family funding, studying business and marketing while I scraped together credits in culinary arts. She'd call occasionally to share her successes. Dean's List, internships at prestigious companies, job offers before graduation. I'd share my small victories, a perfect souffle, praise from a demanding instructor, a scholarship I'd earned through perfect grades. That's wonderful, Elena, she'd say sweetly. You're so talented at domestic things. Some people are just meant for service industries. After college, I worked in restaurant kitchens for 5 years, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. I started as a prep cook, worked my way up to sous chef, saved every penny I could. Maya launched a successful marketing career, bought a condo, traveled to Europe for vacation. She'd post photos on social media of herself at famous restaurants, always with captions about inspiring family recipes and honoring our Italian heritage. She was appropriating Nonna's legacy without ever having learned a single recipe. When Uncle Roberto died suddenly of a heart attack, Maya inherited everything: the house, his savings, his retirement accounts. I inherited nothing, not even a photograph of my parents. Daddy wanted to leave you something, Maya explained at the funeral. But legally, everything goes to blood relatives. I'm sure you understand. I understood perfectly. I understood that I'd never truly been family to them. But 6 months later, when Nonna Elena's great niece in Italy contacted American relatives about a newly discovered will, everything changed. Nonna had apparently written a second will in her later years, one that Uncle Roberto had never known about. In it, she left her recipe collection and a modest inheritance directly to me, the granddaughter who carries my heart for cooking. Maya's fury was incandescent. She contested the will immediately, claiming I'd manipulated an elderly woman or forged documents. The legal battle lasted 2 years and cost most of my inheritance, but I kept the recipes and enough money to start planning my restaurant. During those court proceedings, Maya's mask finally slipped completely. She doesn't deserve anything, she'd hissed at her lawyer during a break in testimony. She's not even real family. Just because she learned to cook doesn't make her Italian. But the court upheld Nona's will, and I finally had my stake in the family legacy. I spent another year developing my business plan, refining recipes, and saving money. When I told Maya about my restaurant dreams, her reaction was perfectly supportive. That's so exciting, Elena. You've always been such a talented cook. I'd love to help however I can. She offered business advice, marketing connections, even potential investors. Let me review your business plan, she'd suggested. I have experience with startups, and family should help family. In my first life, I'd been so grateful for her support. I'd shared every detail, my location plans, supplier contacts, financial projections, even my signature recipes. Maya had been enthusiastic about everything, offering suggestions and improvements. You should definitely focus on authenticity, she'd advised. That's your competitive advantage. Don't try to modernize too much. Let the traditional recipes speak for themselves. I'd followed her advice exactly, creating a small, intimate restaurant focused on Nona's traditional dishes. I'd invested everything I had into creating the perfect atmosphere, hand-painted murals of Italian countryside, vintage family photos I'd collected from relatives, fresh herbs growing in window boxes. The opening had been magical. Food critics had praised the authenticity, customers had lined up for tables, and Maya had been my biggest cheerleader. She'd brought friends, posted glowing reviews on social media, and told everyone about her amazingly talented cousin. For 3 months, everything had been perfect. I'd been making money, building a reputation, and finally living my dream. I'd even started planning a second location. Then the health inspector had arrived with his surprise inspection. The violations had been devastating: contaminated ingredients, improper food storage, expired items with fresh labels. The shutdown had been immediate and comprehensive. My reputation was destroyed overnight, my savings drained by legal fees and fines. Maya had appeared at my lowest moment with a generous offer. I hate seeing you suffer like this, Elena. Let me buy you out and help you start fresh somewhere else. Maybe restaurants aren't your calling after all. She'd paid fair market value for a failing business, which was a fraction of what the location was worth. I'd been too broken to fight, too devastated to think clearly. I'd signed the papers and walked away from my dream. 6 months later, Fusion by Maya had opened in my former location. She'd kept some of the Italian decorative elements, but transformed the menu into trendy fusion cuisine. The food critics who had praised my authenticity now raved about Maya's innovative approach to traditional flavors. She was making 3 times what I'd ever earned. I'd spiraled into depression, working dead-end catering jobs to pay rent on a studio apartment. My health had deteriorated from stress and heartbreak. Maya would call occasionally to check on me, always with fake concern and real satisfaction. I feel so bad about how things worked out, she'd say. But maybe this was for the best. Running a restaurant is so stressful, and you're much happier doing simple catering work. Some people just aren't cut out for business ownership. The heart attack had come on a December night when I was working a holiday party, watching wealthy guests enjoy expensive fusion cuisine while I served appetizers for minimum wage. The chest pain had started slowly, then hit me like a freight train. I'd collapsed in the kitchen, alone except for a busboy who barely spoke English. Maya had come to the hospital, of course. She'd held my hand and cried perfectly photogenic tears while I drifted in and out of consciousness. "I should have done more to help you," she'd whispered. "I should have been a better cousin." Even as I was dying, she was performing for the nurses, playing the role of devoted family member. But I'd seen the calculation in her eyes, the relief that her greatest threat to success was finally being eliminated. That was my last memory of my first life. Maya's false tears and genuine satisfaction as I slipped away. But now I was back, armed with 4 years of knowledge and a burning desire for justice. The first 3 months of my second life had been spent carefully confirming my memories and laying groundwork for revenge. Every detail I remembered proved accurate. stock market movements, news events, personal interactions. Maya followed the same patterns, made the same choices, even dated the same men in the same order. I'd used my knowledge strategically, making small investments that paid off handsomely. I'd also positioned myself differently this time, building a network of contacts and allies that I'd lacked in my first life. Most importantly, I'd researched every aspect of the insurance fraud and health inspection corruption that had destroyed me. This time, I wasn't planning a small family restaurant. I was building something worth destroying. I'd taken out massive loans, invested in top-tier equipment, and positioned Nona's Kitchen as an upscale destination rather than a neighborhood joint. I'd hired a marketing firm, courted food critics, and built relationships with influencers. On paper, my business was worth over $1 million. My insurance policy reflected that increased value, with comprehensive coverage that included a rarely used clause for malicious contamination. If health violations were proven to be intentional sabotage, the payout would be triple damages, nearly $3 million. But insurance money was just the beginning. I wanted Maya to lose everything, the way she'd destroyed me. I'd hired private investigator Marcus Chen 6 weeks ago, paying him to document Maya's activities and connections. His report had been even more damning than I'd expected. Maya had been running the same scam for 3 years, targeting small restaurant owners across the city. Her method was always the same: befriend struggling restaurant owners, gain their trust, offer business advice while gathering inside information. Then she'd coordinate with her boyfriend, Health Inspector Bradley Morrison, to conduct surprise inspections of businesses she wanted to acquire. The violations were always real: contaminated ingredients, safety violations, clerical irregularities. But they were planted evidence, not organic problems. After the shutdowns, Maya would swoop in with rescue offers, buying prime locations at bankruptcy prices. She'd renovate and rebrand, turning family restaurants into trendy fusion establishments that generated massive profits. Morrison would receive consultation fees for his specialized expertise in restaurant safety, which was technically legal, as long as no one could prove coordination. They'd destroyed 7 small businesses and were planning to expand their operations statewide. I was going to be their 8th and final victim. But this time, they were walking into a trap. The security system I'd installed was military grade, with hidden cameras throughout the restaurant and cloud storage that automatically uploaded footage to multiple servers. I'd also planted listening devices in areas where Maya might have private conversations, and I'd arranged for witnesses to corroborate key elements of my story. Tomorrow's inspection would destroy my restaurant exactly as Maya planned, but the evidence I'd gathered would destroy her entire operation and send both her and Morrison to prison. As I watched Maya finish her sabotage work and slip out the back exit, I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. She had no idea that every moment of her criminal activity was being recorded in high definition. Phase 2 of my plan began immediately, and I called my lawyer first, a former prosecutor named David Kim, who specialized in business crimes. I'd retained him a month ago, ostensibly for general business legal advice, but really to have an expert witness ready for tomorrow's events. David, it's Elena. I need you to review my insurance documentation tonight. I have reason to believe someone might try to sabotage my restaurant. Elena, it's past midnight. Are you okay? Do you need police protection? I'm fine, but I want everything documented properly. If something happens during tomorrow's health inspection, I need to be prepared to prove malicious intent. David was immediately alert. As a former prosecutor, he understood the implications. What kind of sabotage are you expecting? Food contamination, health code violations, anything that would force an immediate shutdown. I have security footage of someone tampering with my inventory tonight. Have you contacted the police? Not yet. I want to gather more evidence first, but I need you to review my insurance policy and prepare documentation for a potential claim. I'll be there in an hour. Don't touch anything that might have been tampered with, and don't let anyone else into the building. My next call went to investigative journalist Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister, whom I'd been cultivating as a contact for 6 weeks. Sarah specialized in municipal corruption stories and had been investigating irregularities in the city's health inspection department. Sarah, it's Elena Rossini. Remember that story you've been working on about health inspection corruption? I think I'm about to become evidence. Elena, it's the middle of the night. What's happening? Someone broke into my restaurant tonight and planted contaminated food in my storage areas. I have security footage of the whole thing. I believe it's connected to the inspection corruption you've been investigating. Sarah was instantly awake. As an investigative journalist, she lived for stories like this. Can you prove connection between the sabotage and the inspection department? I think so. I've been documenting suspicious activities for weeks. If my restaurant gets shut down tomorrow during a surprise inspection, it won't be a coincidence. I'll be there in 30 minutes with a camera crew. Don't let anyone contaminate the evidence. The final call went to my insurance agent, Patricia Williams, whom I'd specifically chosen because of her reputation for thorough documentation. Patricia, this is Elena Rossini at Nana's Kitchen. I need to file a preliminary report about potential sabotage. Sabotage? Elena, what's happened? Someone broke into my restaurant tonight and planted contaminated food in my storage areas. I have security footage of the incident. I'm concerned that tomorrow's scheduled health inspection might be connected to this sabotage. Patricia was immediately professional. Have you contacted law enforcement? My lawyer is handling that, but I want this incident documented with my insurance company immediately before any official inspection occurs. Absolutely, I'm creating a file right now. Can you email me the security footage? I'll send everything within the hour. I want a complete paper trail showing that I reported this sabotage before any health violations were discovered. By dawn, my legal team was in place. David had reviewed my insurance policy and confirmed that the malicious contamination clause would indeed trigger triple damages. Sarah had documented the crime scene and interviewed me extensively about my suspicions regarding Maya and Morrison. Patricia had filed a preliminary insurance claim with timestamps proving I'd reported sabotage before any official inspection. I arrived at the restaurant at my usual time, making sure to act normally for the security cameras. I went through my regular opening routine, checking inventory, preparing fresh ingredients, cleaning equipment. When I discovered the contaminated items Maya had planted, I immediately documented everything with photographs and called my lawyer. David, I found the contaminated food. It's exactly where the security footage shows it was planted. Should I remove it before the health inspector arrives? Absolutely not. Don't touch anything. We need the evidence exactly as the saboteur left it. When the inspector finds those items, we'll have proof that someone else planted them. Inspector Morrison arrived at exactly 9 a.m., clipboard in hand and stern expression perfectly calibrated for intimidation. I greeted him with appropriate surprise and concern. Inspector Morrison, I wasn't expecting an inspection today. We received an anonymous complaint about potential health code violations. This is a surprise inspection. I played my part perfectly, expressing shock and confusion as he began his systematic search. I watched him work, knowing exactly what he would find and where Maya had hidden each violation. His movements were practiced, efficient, and slightly too confident for someone conducting a truly random inspection. The moldy cheese was discovered within 20 minutes, hidden behind fresh inventory in exactly the location Maya had chosen. Morrison photographed it extensively, making detailed notes about the contamination and its proximity to food prep areas. Miss Rossini, this is a serious violation. How long has this contaminated product been in your storage? I have no idea how it got there, I said honestly. I personally check all inventory daily. That cheese wasn't there yesterday. Morrison's expression was skeptical, exactly as Maya had trained him to be. That's what restaurant owners always say. Food contamination doesn't appear overnight. The expired items with fresh labels were found next, arranged in a pattern that suggested systematic fraud rather than oversight. Morrison's documentation was thorough and damning, building a case for immediate closure. Miss Rossini, these violations are severe enough to warrant immediate shutdown. I'm revoking your operating license pending a full investigation. I let genuine shock and devastation show on my face. This part wasn't acting, even knowing it was coming. Watching my dream restaurant being shut down was genuinely traumatic. Inspector, please, there must be some mistake. I run a clean operation. The evidence speaks for itself. You have 24 hours to secure the premises. Any attempt to operate will result in criminal charges. As Morrison finished his paperwork and left, I made the phone calls Maya would be expecting. First to my insurance company reporting the devastating inspection results, then to David, asking for legal advice about fighting the shutdown. Finally, the call Maya was waiting for. Maya, something terrible has happened. The restaurant has been shut down for health violations. Her response was perfectly calibrated sympathy. Oh my God, Elena, what happened? A surprise health inspection this morning. They found contaminated food, expired ingredients with fresh labels. I don't understand how this could have happened. That's horrible. You must be devastated. Is there anything I can do to help? I don't know. My lawyer says fighting the city will be expensive and time-consuming. I might have to consider selling. Maybe that would be for the best, Maya said gently. Restaurant ownership is so stressful, and you've been working so hard. Maybe this is the universe telling you to try something different. But Maya, this was my dream. Everything I worked for. I know, sweetheart, but dreams sometimes have to evolve. Listen, if you do decide to sell, I might be interested in buying you out. I've been thinking about expanding into food service, and I'd love to help family during a difficult time. There it was, the same offer she'd made in my first life, delivered with the same false compassion. Maya, I need time to think. Of course, take all the time you need. But don't wait too long. Property values in your area are so volatile. The longer the restaurant stays closed, the less it will be worth. That afternoon, Marcus delivered his final report. The evidence was even more comprehensive than I'd hoped. Hidden cameras had recorded Maya entering the restaurant and planting evidence. Financial records showed unexplained payments from Maya to Morrison over 6 months. Cell phone records proved they'd coordinated the timing of multiple inspections. But the most damaging evidence was audio recordings of their conversations. Marcus had managed to plant listening devices in Maya's car and office, capturing her discussions with Morrison about their operation. The Rossini job went perfectly. Maya's voice was clear on the recording. Morrison found everything exactly where I left it. She'll be bankrupt within a month. I still feel bad about destroying family businesses, Morrison replied. These people pour their lives into these restaurants. Bradley, we've been through this. We're not destroying anything. We're improving the neighborhood. These small family places are outdated. My fusion restaurants bring much better revenue to the community. What about Elena specifically? She's your cousin. Maya's laugh was cold and calculating. Elena has always been a problem. Even as kids, she thought she deserved things that belonged to me. Nona's recipes, family attention, business success. She acts like she's entitled to everything just because she learned to cook. That seems harsh. Trust me, Bradley. Elena needs to learn her place. Some people are meant to be employees, not owners. I'm actually doing her a favor by forcing her back into kitchen work where she belongs. The recording continued for another 20 minutes, with Maya detailing their previous victims and plans for future expansion. She described her restaurant acquisition strategy like a military campaign, complete with target lists and financial projections. But the most chilling part was her discussion of me personally. Elena thinks she's so special because she can make Nona's old recipes. But cooking talent doesn't make someone a business owner. She's too soft, too trusting. She'll never have what it takes to succeed in this industry. You sound like you really hate her. I don't hate Elena, I just understand her limitations better than she does. She's always been the victim, always blaming others for her failures. Even when we were kids, everything was someone else's fault. Maybe this experience will finally teach her some humility. Morrison's next comment revealed the scope of their operation. How many more restaurants are we planning to target this year? At least 6 more. I've already identified the locations I want to acquire. Small family operations, prime real estate, owners who are struggling financially. The pattern works perfectly every time. What if someone figures out what we're doing? Maya's confidence was absolute. Who's going to figure it out? These restaurant owners are too devastated to think clearly after the shutdowns. They just want to cut their losses and move on. And even if someone suspected corruption, they'd have to prove coordination between us, which is impossible without access to our private communications. She was wrong about that last part. The next morning, I filed my insurance claim with Patricia. The documentation was overwhelming. Security footage of Maya planting evidence, audio recordings of her admitting to sabotage, financial records proving the conspiracy with Morrison. Elena, this is incredible evidence, Patricia said, reviewing the files. I've never seen such clear documentation of malicious contamination. The insurance company will definitely honor the triple damages clause. How much are we talking about? Based on your policy and the evidence of intentional sabotage, you're looking at approximately $2.8 million. Business interruption, equipment replacement, and punitive damages for criminal interference. The amount was even higher than I'd calculated, but money was just the beginning of Maya's punishment. I took the evidence to Sarah Chen next. Her investigative piece would run in 3 days, but she wanted to coordinate with law enforcement to maximize impact. Elena, this story is going to destroy Morrison's career and expose a conspiracy that's been operating for years. Are you prepared for the attention this will bring? I want everyone to know what Maya did. Not just to me, but to all the families she's destroyed. Sarah's article would be comprehensive, detailing the entire operation and naming all the victims. But she also wanted to explore the personal angle, the family betrayal that made this story particularly compelling. Can you tell me about your relationship with Maya growing up? Our readers need to understand how someone could do this to family. I told her everything: the childhood abuse, the systematic sabotage, the years of psychological manipulation. Sarah was a skilled interviewer, drawing out details that painted a complete picture of Maya's character. This isn't just business corruption, Sarah said finally. This is a pattern of abusive behavior that started in childhood and escalated into criminal activity. Maya has been destroying you for decades. The district attorney's office was equally interested in the evidence. Detective Rachel Martinez, who specialized in white-collar crime, reviewed the recordings and financial documents with obvious excitement. Miss Rossini, this is exactly the kind of evidence we need to prosecute systematic corruption. Morrison will definitely face criminal charges, and Maya's conspiracy case is airtight. What kind of sentences are they looking at? Morrison could get 3 to 5 years for bribery and abuse of public office. Maya's charges are more complex: conspiracy, fraud, destruction of property, potentially RICO violations if we can prove this was an organized criminal enterprise. RICO violations? Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. If we can prove Maya was running a systematic operation to defraud restaurant owners, the penalties are much more severe. We're talking 10 to 15 years in federal prison. The legal wheels began turning quickly. Morrison was arrested first, caught completely off guard at his city office. The charges were immediate and devastating: bribery, conspiracy, abuse of public office, and fraud. His suspension became termination within hours. Maya's arrest came 2 days later, after prosecutors had time to review all the evidence and build an airtight case. I watched from across the street as police led her from her condo in handcuffs, her perfect composure finally cracking as reality hit. The media coverage was extensive. Sarah's investigative piece ran as a front-page story. Family betrayal exposes restaurant industry corruption ring. The details were shocking. A successful businesswoman systematically destroying family restaurants to build her own empire, using her cousin as the final victim in a years-long revenge plot. Local news picked up the story immediately. Health inspector arrested in restaurant sabotage scandal. Cousin's betrayal destroys family business, sparks criminal investigation. Italian restaurant owner's security footage exposes corruption ring. The business community was outraged. Restaurant owners across the city came forward with their own stories of suspicious inspections and sudden shutdowns. Morrison's entire career was being investigated, with federal authorities reviewing every inspection he'd conducted for the past 3 years. Maya's legal defense was aggressive, but ultimately hopeless. Her lawyer tried to paint her as a legitimate businesswoman who had been manipulated by Morrison, but the audio recordings made that impossible. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said during opening statements, "you will hear the defendant in her own words, describing how she deliberately destroyed family businesses for personal profit. You will hear her mock the victims whose dreams she crushed, including her own cousin who trusted her with family recipes and business plans." The trial lasted 6 weeks. I testified for 3 days, walking the jury through Maya's lifetime pattern of abuse and manipulation. The audio recordings were played in their entirety, letting Maya condemn herself with her own words. Morrison testified against Maya as part of his plea agreement, detailing their entire operation and confirming that she had been the mastermind. Maya approached me with the plan, he admitted. She identified the restaurants, researched the owners, and coordinated the timing of inspections. I was just following her instructions. Maya's reaction to Morrison's betrayal was spectacular. She screamed at him across the courtroom, calling him a liar and a coward. Her perfect composure finally shattered completely, revealing the rage and entitlement that had always lurked beneath her charming surface. "He's lying!" she shrieked as bailiffs restrained her. "I never forced him to do anything. He was greedy for the money just like everyone else." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, and 7 counts of destruction of property. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 8 years. "Miss Romano," the judge said during sentencing, "you have systematically destroyed the livelihoods of hardworking families for personal gain. Your betrayal of your own cousin, who trusted you with intimate details of her business, represents a particularly callous form of criminal behavior. This court finds your actions to be among the most reprehensible examples of white-collar crime we have seen." Maya's financial empire collapsed immediately. Her restaurants were forced to close during the investigation, and the negative publicity made them impossible to sell. Her condo was seized to pay restitution to victims, and her business assets were frozen pending civil lawsuits. Morrison received 3 years in state prison and lost his pension, but his cooperation had reduced what could have been a much harsher sentence. Meanwhile, my insurance payout had arrived exactly as promised: $2.8 million in total compensation for the malicious destruction of my business. But I wasn't done building my empire. I used the insurance money strategically, purchasing 3 prime restaurant locations that had been vacated by Maya's previous victims. The publicity from the trial had actually increased public interest in my brand. People wanted to support the honest restaurant owner who had exposed the corruption. The first new location opened 6 months after Maya's sentencing. I called it Nona's Kitchen Justice and dedicated it to all the family restaurant owners who had been destroyed by corruption. The menu featured not only my great-grandmother's recipes, but also signature dishes from the restaurants Maya had closed. "I want to honor the dreams that were stolen," I told the food critics at the opening. "Every dish here represents a family story, a tradition that criminals tried to destroy." The response was overwhelming. Food critics praised not only the authentic Italian cuisine, but also the emotional story behind each dish. Customers lined up for tables, eager to support a business that represented justice over corruption. The second location opened a year later, followed by a third 6 months after that. Each restaurant was profitable within weeks, and I was being approached by investors interested in franchising the concept nationally. But the real victory came when I purchased Maya's former flagship restaurant at a bankruptcy auction. The building had been sitting empty since her arrest, and I bought it for a fraction of its original value. I spent months renovating it completely, removing every trace of Maya's fusion concept and restoring the authentic Italian atmosphere I'd originally envisioned. The grand reopening was scheduled for the 2nd anniversary of Maya's sentencing. The media coverage was extensive once again. Restaurant owner reclaims empire from criminal cousin. Justice served. Victim rebuilds from corruption's ashes. Italian restaurant chain grows from family betrayal. I stood in the dining room of my reclaimed flagship location, watching customers enjoy Nona's recipes while reading about our story in framed newspaper articles on the walls. The space that had once represented my greatest defeat was now the crown jewel of my growing empire. 2 years after my rebirth, I owned 4 successful restaurants, employed over 60 people, and had been featured in national food magazines. Maya was serving her sentence in federal prison, working in the kitchen for $1.20 per hour. A bitter irony that I savored every time I thought about it. Morrison had been released after 18 months and was working security at a shopping mall, his law enforcement career permanently destroyed. He'd lost his pension, his reputation, and his relationship with Maya, who blamed him entirely for their downfall. The other victims of their operation had also received justice. 3 of the restaurant owners Maya had destroyed were able to reopen with financial assistance from a victims fund I'd established. The others had received substantial settlements that allowed them to start fresh in new ventures. My success had attracted national attention, and I was being courted by publishers interested in my story. Food Network wanted to feature me in a documentary about restaurant corruption. Business schools were inviting me to speak about detecting and preventing fraud in the restaurant industry. But the most satisfying moment came when I received a letter from Maya in prison. The return address was Federal Correctional Institution Dublin, and her handwriting was shakier than I remembered. Elena, it began, I've had a lot of time to think about what I did to you and to all those families. I know you probably hate me, and I understand why. I destroyed something beautiful that you built with your own hands, and I did it because I was jealous and angry and stupid. The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing her regrets and attempting to explain her actions. I always felt like you were the real granddaughter, the one who deserved Nonna's love and recipes. When Uncle Roberto took you in, I was so afraid that you would replace me in our family. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, but I wanted you to understand that my cruelty came from my own insecurity. She wrote about prison life, about working in the kitchen and thinking about all the meals she'd destroyed through her sabotage. I'm learning to cook here, finally. It's humbling work, and it makes me think about how much love and effort goes into every dish. I destroyed so many people's dreams, and I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover the damage I caused. The letter ended with a request that I knew I would deny. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I hope someday you might be willing to visit me. I want to apologize in person for everything I took from you. I want to hear about your success and know that you're happy. I read the letter twice, then filed it away without responding. Maya's remorse might be genuine, but it was too little and far too late. She'd had decades to choose kindness over cruelty, and she'd consistently chosen destruction. Instead of visiting Maya, I spent that weekend at the grave of my parents, telling them about the empire I'd built from Nonna's recipes. I'd finally found my place in the family legacy, not as the unwanted orphan who should be grateful for scraps, but as the granddaughter who carried on the tradition of love through food. 3 years after my rebirth, my restaurant empire had expanded to 8 locations across 3 cities. I'd published a cookbook that became a bestseller, combining Nonna's traditional recipes with my own story of overcoming family betrayal. The book's dedication read, "To Nonna Elena, whose love survived beyond death to guide me home," and to every family restaurant owner who refuses to let corruption destroy their dreams. I'd also established the Nonna Elena Foundation, which provided low-interest loans to immigrant families starting food businesses. The foundation had helped launch 23 restaurants, creating hundreds of jobs and preserving culinary traditions that might otherwise have been lost. The foundation's work attracted attention from the James Beard Foundation, and I was nominated for their Outstanding Restaurateur Award. The ceremony was held in Chicago, with food industry leaders from across the country in attendance. Standing on that stage, accepting an award for excellence in restaurant ownership, I thought about the night Maya had sabotaged my original restaurant. She'd believed she was destroying my dreams permanently, ending my threat to her success. Instead, she'd given me the motivation to build something far greater than I'd ever imagined. This award belongs to every family whose dreams were temporarily stolen by corruption, I said in my acceptance speech. Nonna Elena used to say that love takes time, like making the perfect ragu. She was right. Sometimes love requires patience, determination, and the courage to fight for what's right. Tonight, I'm accepting this award not just for myself, but for every restaurateur who believes that food should bring families together, not tear them apart. The applause was thunderous, and I could see tears in the eyes of several audience members who knew my story. Maya had tried to write the ending to my story, casting herself as the victor and me as the tragic victim. But she'd underestimated the power of justice, the strength that comes from surviving betrayal, and the magic that happens when someone fights back with both intelligence and integrity. 4 years after my rebirth, I received news that Maya was eligible for early release due to good behavior and overcrowding in the federal prison system. She would serve only 6 years of her 12-year sentence, with the remainder served under supervised release. The news didn't disturb me the way it might have in my previous life. Maya's punishment had never been the point. Justice had been about rebuilding what she'd destroyed and preventing her from hurting others. She would be released as a convicted felon with no assets, no business connections, and a reputation that would make employment in the food industry impossible. Meanwhile, I was preparing to open my flagship location in New York City, a 3-story restaurant in Little Italy that would serve as the national headquarters for my growing empire. The New York Times had already scheduled a review, and Food and Wine magazine wanted to feature me on their cover. The opening night was scheduled for December 15th, exactly 4 years after my death in my previous life. I'd chosen the date deliberately, marking not just the anniversary of my rebirth, but the complete transformation of my story from tragedy to triumph. Maya had taught me that family could be the cruelest enemy, but she'd also taught me that surviving betrayal could make someone stronger than they'd ever imagined. She'd tried to steal my dreams, but instead she'd forced me to dream bigger. As I stood in the kitchen of my New York location, watching my team prepare for opening night, I felt Nonna Elena's presence in every dish. Her recipes had survived Uncle Roberto's neglect, Maya's theft, and even my own death. Love, it turned out, was more durable than hatred. The reservation book was completely full for the next 4 months. Food critics, celebrities, and food lovers from around the world wanted to experience the restaurant that had been born from family betrayal and rebuilt through determination and justice. But the reservation I was most proud of was the table I'd reserved for the families of Maya's other victims, the restaurant owners whose dreams had been destroyed by her corruption. They would be my guests of honor, celebrating not just my success, but their own resilience in rebuilding from devastation. That night, as I watched customers enjoy Nona's recipes in the most prestigious food city in America, I thought about the cosmic force that had given me a second chance. I still didn't understand how or why I'd been reborn, but I no longer questioned the gift. Maybe it was divine intervention. Maybe it was the power of love transcending death. Maybe it was simply the universe's way of ensuring that justice eventually prevails over cruelty. Whatever the explanation, I was grateful for every moment of my second life. Maya had thought she was destroying me forever when she sabotaged my restaurant. Instead, she'd given me the chance to become everything I was meant to be. The insurance payout she'd triggered through her sabotage had become the foundation of an empire. The evidence of her corruption had sent her to prison and saved countless other families from destruction. Her betrayal had taught me to be stronger, smarter, and more determined than I'd ever been in my first life. As closing time approached and the last customers finished their meals, I walked through my empty restaurant, checking each table and remembering the long journey that had brought me here. This wasn't just a business. It was a testament to the power of persistence over betrayal, love over hatred, and justice over corruption. Maya had tried to write the ending to my story, casting herself as the clever villain who destroys the naive victim. But she'd forgotten the most important lesson from Nona's recipes. The best things take time to develop their full flavor, and love always wins in the end. 5 years after my rebirth, I owned 12 restaurants, employed over 200 people, and had become one of the most recognized names in the American food industry. Maya was working at a chain restaurant in Ohio, struggling to rebuild her life as a convicted felon. The serpent had consumed herself, and the lion had inherited not just a kingdom, but an empire built on the foundation of justice, family legacy, and the unbreakable power of love transcending even death itself.